My name's Jennifer Gibson. I'm the university's art curator here at U of W, and it's my honor to introduce Hawk EI, the Edgar Heap of birds, to discuss his artistic practice with us today. I'm going to read a little bit of Edgar's distinguished biography. He serves as a leader of the traditional Cheyenne Elk Warrior Society. His artistic creations and efforts as an advocate for Indigenous communities worldwide are focused first on social justice and then the personal freedom to live within the tribal circle as an expressive individual. Edgar's a professor at the University of Oklahoma, where he's taught visual arts for over 3 decades. He's also taught as visiting professor at Yale University, Rhode Island School of Design, and also at the Michaelis School of Fine Art at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. His artworks have been shown in more than 50 solo exhibitions and many group exhibitions across the globe. A few highlights include shows at the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and the Met, all in New York. Also at Documenta in Germany, the Grand Palais in Paris, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney. So locally, Edgar has presented his work before here in Winnipeg at Urban Shaman Gallery in 2006 in an exhibition. It was a solo exhibition and a public art project called Remembering in America. The following year, his artwork was chosen by the Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian as their entry towards the competition for the United States Pavilion in the 52nd Venice Biennale. He represented the Smithsonian with a major public art project and blown glass works titled Most Serene Republics. Starting today and continuing for the next 2 months, you can actually see some of Edgar's works in Gallery 1C03, our campus art gallery, in a group exhibition called A Putting Down of Roots, 40 Years of CV2. So I'd invite you to come check out that show. The reception is today from 4 to 6, and the show continues until November 14th. Edgar's received grants and awards from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Rockefeller Foundation, Lewis Comfort Tiffany Foundation, Lila Wallace Foundation, and the Andy Warhol Foundation, among others. In 2008, he was awarded an honorary Doctor of Fine Arts from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston. In 2012, he was one of 50 artists honored by United States Artists and named USA Ford Fellow in the Visual Arts category. And just in the last few months, Duke University Press has published a book on his life and art. Please join me in welcoming Edgar Heap of birds.
Thank you for the welcome and all those kind words. And I'm going to be offering history and expressions from how I see life in Oklahoma and the USA and North America. Starting out with this image you see on the wall here with my grandmother. We also have the book that was mentioned. I have one copy here if you want to see that later as well, that Jennifer mentioned. I want to introduce this work to you, but I want to firstly say that this talk is set forth to the Indigenous women of this hemisphere. That's who I want to honor today with this talk. And so I start with my grandmother, and it's the beginning of everything, is the Native women. Her name deals with the light that comes from the sky during the storms, and as the charge happens to the Earth's surface, it meets together, and there's a spark. And they call that lightning, but it's a scientific event. You would say Ho'itzi'o, and that's Lightning Woman. So who we have here is Lightning Woman with her daughter in Oklahoma many years ago. And my daughter, who's 6 years old, is Ho'itzi'o as well. Going back in time, the next generation back, Grace Big Bear, who was present at the Ouachita Massacre with Colonel Custer and his army from the USA, holding her baby in her cradle board. The cradle board is actually developed, as I was told by an elder Cheyenne woman, to have your baby collected and living in the prairies of Oklahoma, a very dangerous place to be a few hundred years ago, and maybe still today. But with the Army coming, they actually built 3 forts to kill us. They built Fort Reno, Fort Cantonment, and a special fort called Fort Supply to resupply Custer's army to find the Cheyenne to kill them in the winter. So with your baby, you had to be ready to run. You couldn't have your baby loose. You had to be ready to go at any moment. And maybe in Afghanistan, it's the same way today with the American Army at the door. I made this piece as part of an exhibition called Preparing for War, and it's about an 18-foot wall of words. This was done in New York City, in Brooklyn, in a military terminal, and it was part of a project with many other artists, not a native project, but it's a contemporary project, probably in 83 or so. But I wanted to go back and revisit the experience of the Ouachita Massacre with Colonel Custer, and I made this message on the wall. But I want to read you a text from a young woman from the Cheyenne tribe who survived that day. Many Cheyenne were killed during the fight. The air was full of smoke from gunfire, and it was almost impossible to flee because bullets were flying everywhere. However, somehow we ran and kept running to find a hiding place. As we ran, we could see the red fire of shots. We got near a hill, and there we saw a steep path where an old road used to be. There was red grass along the path, and although the ponies had eaten some of it, it was still high enough for us to hide. In this grass, we lay flat, our hearts beating fast, and we were afraid to move. It was now broad daylight. It frightened us to listen to the noise and cries of the wounded. When the noise seemed to quiet down, we believed the battle was about to end. We raised our heads high enough to see what was going on. We saw a dark figure lying near a hill, and later we learned it was the body of a Cheyenne woman and child. The woman's body had been cut open by the soldiers. So going back to Grace Big Bear, being a young woman in that massacre, Colonel Custer brutalized the tribe, and he also engaged in human trafficking. He paraded with captured victims back into Fort Supply, and he sent word to get sort of a band ready and to receive his army in this fanfare. And he had taken women and children back to the fort. There, they were held for some time and raped. Some brought back and dumped back off in western Oklahoma. But Custer even kept a woman for himself for 2 years and kept her with him. So I met an old lady one day on the reservation, and she was all white-skinned, spoke fluent Cheyenne, had blue eyes, and she was also part of that legacy of that massacre. So those kind of events carry forth to many people's lives today. After that massacre, that was the last battle. Before that, there was Sand Creek in Colorado for the Cheyenne Nation. But after the Ouachita Massacre with Custer, instead of having peace when the warriors surrendered, they were taking all prisoners of war, and something that's an ongoing tradition in America. And here they are gathered together, going to a place called Fort Sill. And Fort Sill was a fort that actually housed Geronimo at one point. So they were taken there and later moved on by train to a place called Fort Marion in Florida. Fort Sill is certainly very active today. It's in southern Oklahoma. It's the largest artillery base in the world. So they staged most of the wars with big cannon from the same fort that the Cheyennes were kept in. So it's an ongoing, forts are ongoing, they're not just names of cities. So there are the warriors and chiefs captured there going to the fort. I found a list as a young artist when I was 26, 25. I was living in Philadelphia, I was in graduate school. After that, I've looked at research and did research, but I found a list from Captain Pratt. Captain Pratt was the jailer of the Fort Marion prisoners of war. And so he made a list of all his captured Cheyenne. And at the top of the list, you'll see my name over here, Heap Birds, Bear Shield, Mahnemik, his eagle head. And there was a fourth name of one of the chiefs. His name was Gray Beard, and he was killed on the train track on the way to Fort Marion. So the first four, the three there, but there was one missing that died, but those four are the four principal chiefs of the Cheyenne tribe. So they were taken away from their families and held hostage in prison so that Oklahoma could become a state. So of course it was a place free for Native people to live as they had for thousands of years. And after the Washita, it became a place for the so-called settlers to come. And usually in America, I don't know about Canada, but usually when you say settler, the army precedes the settler. The strike force comes first, then the settlers move in next. And so I made a painting about all the words. His name, Heap O' Birds, was actually translated back into Cheyenne, certainly in the beginning, as Moyohonhaskus, or many magpies, then mistranslated as Heap O' Birds, and later to become Heap of Birds, which I carry that name. So in a sense, the language imprisoned the warriors too. That was what they had to come to grips with, suddenly being on an army's list in prison. And so as you see my work progress through this lecture today, I guess I turn the words back against the Americans in some ways, but we become empowered by the words as well. Here are the warriors while they're in prison. Some time has passed. Very sickly, very much having trouble with the more tropical weather, and of course their hearts are very low from being taken from their families and worrying about what's happening with the three forts that are still in Oklahoma guarding the Cheyenne people. When they were in prison in St. Augustine, Florida, Fort Marion, there were no charges, there were no courts, there were no advocates, there was no representation, much like Guantanamo Bay, where America chooses to incarcerate enemy combatants without any kind of due process. So they've been doing that for a long time, and that same tactic continues. These are prisoners at Guantanamo, which is still active. So I have a lot of empathy and feeling about the warriors that were taken to Fort Marion, our leaders of the Cheyenne Nation. And I was there. We had an exhibition at a college in St. Augustine just this last year, and I created a new piece for that. But I've been back twice, and I take offerings for the spirits of the warriors for remembrance and a little bit of healing. And I was able to shut the fort down. It's now a national park zone, and I was able to offer the ceremonial pipe within the fort, for the spirits. And I was just there the other day, a few months ago. There were drawings made in prison, so certainly being an artist, being a warrior, those have been traits of Cheyenne life. This is a drawing by an artist who was in prison. His name is Bear's Heart. And so he made a really interesting drawing showing you this kind of never-ending surge in a linear fashion of, if you look closely, it's hard to see, but if you look closely, there's horses, army, personnel, and guns moving forward. And so I believe he did that very deliberately to show how they came in this line. This linear force came across North America. Now, in a more traditional sensibility, we would certainly adopt and support the circle. The continuum, the sunrise, the planets moving around our planet, the stars and so forth. And so this is another artist, his name is Making Medicine. And so he's showing you actually the buffalo hunt, but he's actually not respecting the rectangle. He's running the buffalo up the side of the page, up the top and around the other side. So he doesn't really acknowledge this rectangle, much like this room we're in a sense, the windows or the doors, not really being a native space, but to have this circular form to be where we want to be. It's a circular, much like your mother's womb, where we all came from. So the Fort Marion prisoners of war, heap of birds, many magpies. He was the father of Black Wolf. Black Wolf is here with his pipe. He was the leader of the Elk Warrior Society, as I am today. His boy, his son, was Guy Heap of Birds here. His son was Charles Heap of Birds, who carried the same name as the chief, many magpies. Charles Heap of Birds is my father. So it doesn't take too long to get back to that time of the war and the injustice. I've done more research also certainly with my name. It was mentioned a couple of times in my introduction, Hakievi. And Hakievi was my grandmother's offering to me as a name, Little Chief. But as I learned later, it went back 100 years. And my uncle was Little Chief. And then going back to many magpies in prison in Florida, his nephew was Hakievi. So there was a Hakievi at the Fort Marion. And he was born in 1854. I was born in 1954. And so this is a drawing by Hakievi. And it's called Little Chief Chasing Two Osages. So he's actually showing you kind of his battle exploits, but not against the U.S. military. He wants to go home someday, so he's not going to show himself fighting the army, which he'd like to do. But he's going to show you maybe enemies of his own tribe, the Osage people. This is a drawing I made when I was a young artist. Not a very good drawing, but going back to making a Xerox copy of Little Chief's picture of the Osages and him chasing them. And then kind of this circular text, and then two stanzas of text dealing with 1854 was born, 1954 my side, this side. He actually went to school at Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania after he was released from prison. I went to school in Philadelphia for my Master of Fine Arts degree. I actually stopped in Carlisle as well. And then the last phrase, Clinton last home, which is a town in Oklahoma. And I've been back in Oklahoma for, maybe 30 years. And that's my last home. I'm back home. The text here is a monoprint I made for the show that was in Fort Marion. And I made another one that just had it repeated 3 times, num-shum, num-shum, num-shum. So kind of a lamentation, lamenting the loss. Num-shum's grandfather. So the warriors, the chiefs, some of them were buried in Fort Marion. And so Num-shum, grandfather, the loss of grandfather. That kind of injustice that I mentioned from the Fort Marion era and the 3 forts that they built to kill the Cheyenne, it goes on to this day, obviously, and we suffer from all the different tribes in the Americas. As you may know, when they killed bin Laden in Pakistan, they immediately phoned back to the Situation Room, and there Obama was there, and Hillary Clinton was there, and they were waiting to hear the news, and they told them both that Geronimo was dead, and they were elated. Obama was elated. So you come to this day, and you have many Apaches in the armed forces, yet you have an Apache name given to the worst terrorists on earth that they would see. And how can that ever become parody or sensitivity to call bin Laden an Apache name? This is another monoprint. I make a lot of monoprints, and this is one that deals with the massacres, as you can see, Sand Creek, Ouachita, both Cheyenne massacres, Shivington of Colorado, the first, Custer, the second. And children dying in both of those, Cheyenne children dying, but not much empathy, America, not much care. But the final one, Sandy Hook, that's the kindergartners in Connecticut who were murdered, and much empathy to that day. So the point being that we want to certainly foster empathy for all the children that die. There's not a hierarchy, shouldn't be, of loss. This was done about the Ouachita, so the kids were running through the water and killed by the Custer's army. I've been working in Australia as well as Africa, and I work with Aboriginal artists in Australia, Indigenous artists from Sydney and Adelaide, and we collaborated on a project called 16 Songs. We toured that in America, and we came to Cleveland, Ohio, to an art museum, and we had a contract to create a public art piece for the museum in Cleveland. And so, of course, I had a special desire to deal with Cleveland, as you can see from the sort of hideous baseball thing. So I made them a special billboard. Here's their billboard. There it is. And they got their feelings hurt. The Cleveland baseball team said I was infringing on their copyright, and then I could not make the image. And before that, they said, we're honoring all the Native people by making this wonderful picture here. And I said, well, if it's honoring me, then I can change it. And they said, no, you can't. No, we're going to sue you, and you're actually infringing on copyright. So we actually went to the newspaper, and they published this image in the newspaper like the next day. And then we got anonymous donations of money to make more billboards. The museum censored my billboard, but we made more billboards with extra money. And I gave the billboard to the American Indian Movement, and they made T-shirts and bumper stickers. And then eventually, the museum said, please make ours too. Please come and make ours. And I did. So we made like 3, and we were supposed to make 1. And they told me, the American Indian Movement said it gave them so much more momentum, the resistance and then the provocative nature of my messages. But then what it does, certainly, it puts the issue on the table. And that's what public art does. It's not going to change the whole world, but it gets it spoken about, in the media. And so the media will actually, like the media, the word, it'll mediate your work to the public, which is part of the tactic, is to be so provocative you become newsworthy, and then they actually publish it for free, so it's great. These are billboards in Toronto, and I made about 10. I'm just going to show you a couple today from Nuit Blanche, which is coming up right now, and certainly here, and they're called Imperial Canada, and they were all, this one was dealing with the pedophiles in the church, and the residential schools implicated as well, but the abuse of what they call the black robes, the priests. And this is Imperial Canada Shares Stolen Lands. So I did 20-foot billboards in Toronto along Queen Street, and then I did a whole series of same 10 messages as bus shelters in Vancouver, working with Grunt Gallery in Vancouver. So I work across Canada quite a bit, and I enjoyed putting messages out in the public for free. It just engaged like an advertisement. This is one of the most important public pieces I've done. This deals with Abraham Lincoln, and I can read you the text here on the message at the bottom. It's December 26, 1862, Mankato, Minnesota, execution order issued by President of the United States Abraham Lincoln. It's a great mystery, great spirit, Wakatonka, death by hanging. During the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln authorized the mass execution of 38 Dakota warriors. They were all hung on the same day in a town called Mankato, Minnesota, and they had caused an uprising against the citizens of or settlers of Minnesota, but they were not fed. The tribe was not fed. They were starving, and they were made to stay on a reservation. They could not hunt. And so they attacked the man that had the food, the storehouse manager. He would not release the food because there was a civil war and the USA wouldn't pay him his fee. So he kept the food locked up. So they did kill him, take the food for their families. And after the truce was settled, they again gathered up all the people and wanted to execute 300 people. And so Abraham Lincoln, they say he intervened and he just killed 38. So the largest mass execution in America's history is by President Lincoln. After he was assassinated, Andrew Johnson killed 2 more. So there are 40 altogether. So I was in Minneapolis. I had a major show at the Walker Art Center, one of the best art museums in the world, modern art museum. But I wanted to do something on the street level and something addressing Native communities. So I created a piece called Building Minnesota, and this was done on a 400-foot parquet along the Mississippi River. And I actually, here in the horizon are gold medal and Pillsbury flour mills. And in my research, I found that that's why they were killed, because they wanted to make more farmland instead of Indian reservations in Minnesota. They wanted to move the Dakota people to South Dakota. So most people think of Dakota, you think of South Dakota, you don't think of Minnesota, because they killed 40 of their warriors and leaders. When I created these sign pieces and put them in the ground, I actually bought 40 pounds of flour and made an ark with flour first, then put the signs in the flour. I was also very privileged to work with middle school students who were descendants from the warriors who were executed. And we went to the graves of the warriors. We met some of the current chiefs of the tribe. And then they helped me in the snow, put the signs in the ground. And people came and made prayer ties. I was just given a prayer bundle a few minutes ago from here, and these were tied on the signs. So in some ways, it did help offer recognition of that loss and maybe help people move through that loss. It was up for over a year. It caused a lot of trouble in Minneapolis, and Abraham Lincoln fans were very upset. But it was just the truth. I continue to work with students. I've done that in Indonesia, in Europe, in Asia, America. This is a project I undertook with students at the University of Utah. And I have a series called Native Hosts. And so I take the name of the province or state or city, Salt Lake City, I reverse it backwards. Salt Lake City, today your host is Nuchi. And I've done that in many cities. I'll show you one in Vancouver here in a minute. But one of the things we do is to try to organize a thought process of turning people around to see their past differently. So if you could turn the host province around, they might see the real past they have. They might not begin with their own existence. They might begin with a native one. And then the secondary thesis is to adjust and correct the name of the people. And so, as I state many times, America is full of fiction, and Canada, I guess, follows suit. They create their own fiction, and maybe it's called patriotism, whatever you want to call it. But it's just a series of untruths, untrue issues. At the University of Utah, to this day, their football team is called the Utes. Thus you get Utah, the Ute tribe. And I asked the Ute students who are pictured here, so-called Utes, what is your tribe? And they said, Nuchi. It's not Ute. Ute doesn't mean anything to anybody, just a white man, And so we corrected that. So today your host is Nuchi. And so that happens throughout most of the projects. We have to find the real name of the tribe. And we put this up at the Student Indian Center building, and I had some more signs on campus. I was visiting artists there. Here's a piece I'm very proud of. This is at UBC in Vancouver, and British Columbia is reversed here. And I have 12 pieces. I work with the Belkin Gallery at UBC. Very good guy. I also work with the Museum of Anthropology as well. I've shown in both places. But we have 12 panels, First Nations panels, up permanently at the UBC campus. So it's something I do. I'm working also in LA with another project. So I like to come to campuses and honor the tribes. And if I can make them permanent, I'm even better off, to do that. We have 4 pieces in LA that are permanent pieces at Pitzer College. And this particular piece, I'm very proud that I situate these myself. I position them. And this one I positioned at the driveway of the president's house when he goes home, or she goes home. He has to thank the tribe every night when he goes home. So it was very good positioning. I've been working also in the Caribbean, in St. Croix, and here the U.S. Virgin Islands is reversed. I had a whole series of pieces with different tribes from the Caribbean. My favorite is the cruise ship when it comes in, and they have to deal with a new reality where they're thinking about, on a good day, they might go as far as thinking about the Middle Passage and slavery, maybe, probably not, but maybe. They will never think about Native America when they go to the Caribbean. And so my sign is trying to usher in that thought process to honor the Taino. And we're going to go down to Key West in March and do a project there. So that's really the Caribbean too. So there's many, many blind spots that it's important to illuminate. I've been working in Europe as well. This is a banner for an environmental show exhibit at a park near King's Cross Station. And I think often Europeans don't really acknowledge their role in the genocide. Here are 2 images from the Christian dagger cross. And of course, it's the newer image, the biohazard. Much of the genocide was from disease. And so that's the banner that was placed near King's Cross Station. 25 million Red Indian lives lost. And of course, when you I went to school in London, grad school, so I was struck by how they call me. They said, "Are you a Red Indian?" So certainly they have a differentiation between India and North America. So if you're from North America, you're a Red Indian. So these lives that were lost, I hired a PhD anthropologist to research it for me, the statistics, and he found between 25 million to 100 million lives were lost from the so-called contact. So that's how many citizens we lost in this hemisphere from Europeans coming, and then there was the violent acts as well. This particular exhibit, though, was about eco-art, and some of that alluded to population control. If we had a better population control, we'd have a better world. And I was kind of on the other side of that question, in that we've already had a population control, by all the genocide. We need to move our population back up and have more lives in our tribes. I'm very involved with ceremonial practice and religion, certainly, and monuments throughout the Americas, and also other parts of the world. This is the medicine wheel at the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming. So here we have a 50-foot circle across. We have the spokes radiating out. And in many, many cases, you have this image, the circle, but it's not an aesthetic. It's actually science, and that's important to remember, that Native citizens were involved with science. So here's a diagram of regal cirrus going back to summer solstice, sunrise, sunset. And so those spokes aren't there for an aesthetic representation, a pretty representation. They're there for the scientific notations of the bodies passing over us. So we've been there probably 1,000 years. The Cheyenne tribe, other tribes, Shoshone, Crow, Sioux, and they worship on that mountain. I've been up there twice. So it's a very good relationship with the National Forest Service. And I made a sculpture in Denver that deals with that same system. Here is a diagram of the spokes on the stone wheel. Now, this is a contemporary Earth Renewal Lodge, which happens from Oklahoma to this part of the world and to the west, to Saskatchewan and so on. And we have trees at the top, cottonwood trees, that echo the spokes of the wheel. And they have the same star systems notated. But I want to show you that there's a fork tree supporting the universe. There's 12 fork trees in this structure. And I'm an instructor in the ceremony here, but I'm also an artist that can make a reflection of this. That's my sculpture in Denver called Wheel. It's 50 foot across, just like the other one in Wyoming. Each position spot is a star system. And with this particular sculpture, I've actually omitted 2 trees because I don't want to make it a operational tool of religion. It's more of a art piece. And it's a fairly autobiographical piece. It deals with history of Anasazi, early history of the Colorado region, and coming forward to other events from reservation life to vocational skills, even Fort Marion is involved. And then being empowered by your religion and returning back home again. So I'll show you a short video in a few minutes of this sculpture being made in Denver. I've taken students there from my reservation to do workshops in Denver, and we did drawings and so forth. At the top of the wall is my grandmother again, Hoitzio, and she's talking with her oratory. Not Kev Ho'esim, not Kev Ho'esim. We always come back home in Cheyenne. This was our first reservation area in the Fort Laramie Treaty. So in a sense, this 50-foot circle, I'm occupying it with my sculpture as a Cheyenne homeland. This is a young student from Oklahoma, Cheyenne girl, who made a drawing about one of the trees. Now, when I created the sculpture, there's no top, there's no rafters on the sculpture. My intention, had a very, very demanding kind of intention, was that native life would complete my sculpture. And I finished it in 2005. And since then, I've been very, very honored to say that the Sand Creek descendants, the Sand Creek people who were massacred, their families, sponsor a run from Sand Creek in southern Colorado to Denver every year on the anniversary of the massacre. And the run concludes at Wheel, and they present a candlelight vigil at the sculpture. So it really has come to pass that human activity, native activity, has completed the sculpture. And here's the medicine wheel as well, in a drawing rendition here. And so you need to know about this X form. This would be the summer solstice sunrise, northeast, black shape, going around the earth and setting in the northwest, the longest day of the year. This is the shortest day of the year, yellow. Winter solstice, the sun rising in the southeast, a short day, setting in the southwest. So I've done that piece, but I've actually taught about that on the reservation. We made paintings. These are students at the tribal complex in Concho, Oklahoma. And I did a workshop with 200 elders last year. It was wonderful. And we all made medicine wheel paintings. I've also done some work in gymnasiums on the reservation, making very, very large digital prints of beadwork, trying to encourage young people on the reservation to do beadwork as well. This is my studio and some work I'm doing with my painting that come from the red earth, the trees, and the shapes that I enjoy creating, making the movement across the picture plane, going from left to right. The trees were very involved with that for many years. I painted also in Maine on an island, Bar Harbor, Maine, in this barn. And this is a newer series with blue colors. And I responded to fish also. So I've been in Hawaii working and snorkeling now and then. And that gives me some of the imagery. I'll show you an image from the sea. This is the volcano in Bali. And I was working in Java and Lombok and also Bali. And from that perspective, underneath, you have this. And so that gave me a lot of inspiration to create my paintings as well. In the blues, that's coral and fish, coral below and the fish above. And these are some of the paintings as they progress from being blank canvases, then we add more and more shapes on them. 4 of them are painted at a time, which is Nuf, Cheyenne word Nuf is 4. And here are a series of paintings in more like autumn colors, I guess reds. And that was a good series to create. I limited my palette to the red colors. Red and orange, yellow. The last few things I'll show before the video will be the work from the Venice Biennale, and this is a grave marker for Long Wolf. He was a warrior and his family. They were taken as part of the Wild West shows of Buffalo Bill, and he died in London. He was buried in Brompton Cemetery. So as my offering to the Venice Biennale, I created a memorial project called Muslim Republics, and I showed that in Italy. And they came to Italy as part of the Wild West show. They came to Verona and the Colosseum, and they also performed in Moscow, London, all over Europe. And many of them died. There were over 20 that died. So here we have honor the death of Numshum grandfather, Long Wolf Rementare. Rementare is to remember or lament. And there's the warriors and a little boy who were present there with Buffalo Bill, and some of them were victims of his care in Europe. I also made glass vases as well with craftspeople at Murano, a wonderful island glassblowing studio. And that's some of the glass being blown. And the glass itself became like the blood and bodies around the vase, reflecting the warriors themselves. So I'll go to the video now. This is from the Denver Art Museum wheel, and it'll show you how the sculpture was created, fabricated, and then we have it actually being used as a place to dance as well. And the music is from Red Bull, who I think they're from Alberta, I believe, and one of my favorite drum groups. And the wheels come here as well. So they're in Oklahoma, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, throughout the Intermountain region. as a celebratory location as well. There in Denver. It's up permanently at the Denver Art Museum. Okay, I want to close with another short video. This one, we have the exhibit opening today, this afternoon, and it deals with text, words, poetry. And so we were my son and I, able to work on a project at the National Portrait Gallery in London. And I'm going to give you this image of some of the prints and a workshop we did on text in London. I guess like about 2 years ago at the MPG on Trafalgar Square.
How do we sell our money? How do we sell the stars? How do we sell crazy horse? We hear what you said. Crazy horse. We hear what you said.
The main thing I want to give you tonight, right now, is consider describing yourself or some other experience with 3 words. What I want you to think about is how we look at each other, and particularly if you can use your imagination and look into the gallery where the Catlin paintings are and all those faces of Native American people. We go to see those faces, but yet they're looking back at us. And none of the faces are smiling. None of them have much emotion. And so he's edited out the humanity of those human beings. And Native American people are very humorous. They joke, they tease, they laugh, they get mad, they cry, but none of those paintings are doing that. You see? So he's edited out that whole life, which has become a standardized view that Native folks are stoic, quiet, and it's totally a fraud. They're not. All the narrative art from Native America, First Nations, most of that is for a non-Native audience. They don't want to come and be part of your community. They're afraid of you or they're worried. They want to see a picture of it somewhere that's sort of safe, and then they can make money. I mean, you can make money selling it to them. So often, in actuality, all of those paintings are not Native thinking. The narrative is a white man's way, you know. The Indian way is abstract and conceptual. My work is actually very Native because it's all conceptual. Much of it's very conceptual, symbolic, and what people think about art. They've been so much sort of pandering toward the white audience and the white market. They've built a whole backlog of art history that's all kind of make-believe. It's not really from Native world at all. We censor ourselves, Native artists do. We stop before we start, you know. And my work has never been stopped anywhere. We divert it to somewhere else if it gets resistance. And so I've done many projects that are very provocative and inflammatory, I suppose, but they've never been stopped. And I don't stop them. I don't back away. I keep charging ahead, and we make progress on certain issues. But there are many artists that are First Nations, Indigenous, don't even take that charge. We're not all whaling or whatever. We're not hunting buffalo. You know, that's a maybe there's a little fragment of society that's involved with that, but that's not it anymore. And if you keep painting portraits of happy buffalo hunts, you know, then the public is going to believe we're actually happy buffalo hunting. suppose anthropology is partly to blame, but there has been this huge expectation to explain your culture, you know. And if you're a native person, you got non-natives, they want to know the answer, you know. And it's summation, easy package, and then they'll take it home, you know, put it on the shelf, you know. And nothing happens. For me, my work has, the door is left open. I enjoy when there's an entree to get in it. I'm welcome to come in it and then make of it what I want to make. Not always just here's the answer. You know, it's not going to be a resolution. It's going to be the entering part of it to discuss, to begin talking about it. And that's what art's about, is generating that discussion. Catlin exhibit, you know, the non-native painter who made all these stoic portraits. And he actually had a thesis, and it was called Shut Your Mouth. He wrote a book. And he believed that if you didn't open your mouth, it was a better world, and you breathe through your nose. It was really ridiculous. And so he painted all the Indians with their mouths closed and just looking ahead, and that's become a stereotype that, you know, is all over the world. And so my project there was to occupy the museum for a day and to do a workshop about expressing yourself with the 3 words and project those prints on the wall and so on. And we even had a DJ, and I curated 4 hours of native music, contemporary music, and we played that through the whole time. You know, so it was a very important expression. My son was there, who was in the health field. He lectured on native health as well. So it was there at the London Museum on Trafalgar Square. So with that, I'll close. Thank you. Thanks. So anyway.